Oh, okay, let's say the prayers first. Dumba jumden de dijen shewa ta jumba yanda ba zobe sanje rigba dan shabzo demba dewara shewa jigden jemba jebo deve galo jorwa lana mewa lada me namje dumba sanje jumden de bejawa shaja adoba la shazel Chudu jabzu che wo dumba jumden de jen shewa ta jumba yanda ba zobe sanje rigba dan shabzu demba Dewara jewa jigden jemba jebo dube kalo gyurwa lana meba Lada me namje dumba sanje jumden de bejawa shaja tuba la chazelo chudu jabzu che wo dumba jumden de jen shewa Jajumba yandaba zobe sanje rigwa dan shabso temba dewara sheba jigden kemba jebu ndube galo jurwa lana meba lala me namje dumba sanje jumden de penjawa shaja tuba la chazel chudo jabzo che ho sanje chuda soje chonama la chanju ubado dane jabzo je Dagi chushe jebe sonam je jola penje sanje jobara sho sanje chodan soje chonamala chanju bado dane japso che dagi chushe jebe sonam je jola penje sanje jobara sho sanje chodan soje chonamala Janju bado dane japso che dagi chushe jibe sonam anje. Jola benje sanje jobara shos. Okay, good morning. And how is everyone? I hope all of you are well, and this time is a very difficult time, and everyone in the whole world is suffering, had to make major changes in our lives. And it is very stressful. It is very difficult. It is painful. So before we jump into the actual topic, the wheel of sharp weapon, I thought to spend some time reminding all of you of the ways to cope with this adversity or this difficulty that we are all faced with. So even though everybody is undergoing this hardship, but I believe that you, those who have been studying Dharma for many years, may find it much easier to cope with this kind of adversity, because we are more resilient. We have greater resilience because we have greater resources to tackle. So in psychology, they talk about going back to your resources. So of course, it's not talking about money and supply. It's basically talking about the resources that you can employ to cope with such difficulty, especially the attitudes, mental attitudes. Of course, there are external factors that we can use, but it is not limited to external resources. And that includes mental resources. And I believe that as a practitioner, as a long-time student, as someone who have studied for many years, you would have no limitations. You would have no shortage of resources to apply in such difficult times. So I know that you know what to do, and you have been applying those techniques, those understandings that you have gained throughout these years. But I just want to remind some of the things so that some of you who are joining for the first time may find it helpful. So we have a saying that, whether a person is a real practitioner or not can be gauged when adversity strikes us, when we are met with challenges, when we are faced with difficulties. That will be the main test. That would be the real test to see whether we are a practitioner or not. When things are going well, everybody seems to be practicing. Everybody seems happy and, like whatever you have studied, it makes sense. But when difficulties arise, when we are challenged with this kind of inevitable challenges, if you are able to remain calm and even smile in the face of challenge, that is testimony or evidence that one is a practitioner, one is a real practitioner. So I hope, even though this is a difficult time, but you may be finding ways to cope with this difficulty, especially transforming these difficult situations or adversities into what you call the transforming into path. Sorry, let me get a tissue. Yeah, so just a reminder. So as you have seen the slides, so the first two slides are to cover that that part. So the first one is very simple. It is using the what is called the Shantideva's logic. So in psychology, one of the recommendations to develop resilience is to change our narratives. So normally our focus would be on the challenges itself. Our focus would be the problem focus. We will be, our focus is normally centered on the problems that we are going through. So here they are suggesting that we need to find a new perspective, contemplate on the upsides, and then see whether we can find a silver lining from these difficult times. So that, I feel that one way to do is using Shantideva's logic. Let me just pull up that slide. If you go to Cultureling website, under the programs, current program English, so at the end of the page, you will see that PowerPoint slides. So the first one, to apply the Shantideva's logic. So this is the verse that Shantideva says, why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? And what is the use of being unhappy about something if it cannot be remedied? So I find this very, very useful. And I attribute my overcoming the loss of my father to this contemplating on this verse. I was so attached to my father. So when my father was diagnosed with cancer and eventually he passed away, he was only 61 years old. So there were times where it was unimaginable. How would I live if my father finally dies? So eventually when my father passed away, of course, there was sense of loss and much grief. But this really helped me. This line, whether my feeling sadness and worrying about the situation, will it help to bring him back? That's a very powerful question. So when I keep asking that, and what is the point? If it cannot, remedy the problem, then it's like, why am I doing that? So here we can apply that logic here. So you see there are two ways to approach to our problems. If you look at the slides, so you have a problem, you have a situation. In this situation, so we are all kind of locked in our house. We cannot go and do things that we normally do. And then, of course, some people lost their job. There's no income. And it is quite scary. So that is the problem. So now the question we should ask is, can we do something about it? If the answer is yes, then why worry? Why get upset? Why feel anxious? Because there is something you can do about it. But I believe that in this situation, some aspects there's nothing we can do, but some aspects we can do something about it. So the second question is, if there's a problem, so if the answer is no, that we cannot do anything about it, then what is the point of getting upset? Our worrying about the situation, our being anxious about the situation will not solve the problem, but instead it will worsen the situation. And this is very important, especially if you are living with children, on the one hand, you want to give assurance to your children and your family members that it is no point worrying, no point feeling anxious about it. That's what we normally advise to other people. And we want our family members to be calm and not to be agitated and not to be upset and anxious, because then the anxiety level will go up. And then if you have other health conditions, that will trigger those conditions. So you wanted to calm and give assurance to your children and your family members. The best way to do is to set an example, to show them that you are calm. If you constantly worry and you are in that constantly in that state of anxiety, how can you assure other people, your loved ones, that it will be okay? No need to worry. So that's very important. So we need to first take care of ourselves. When we fly, remember in the aeroplane, they always say that in the emergency of oxygen level dropping, those oxygen masks will drop above your head. And then the first thing is to make sure that you put that on first before you attend to those under your care. So here is the same thing. If you want to take care of your loved ones who are under your care, you have to first take care of yourself. You have to show that, it is going to be okay. No point, feeling so stressed over this. So that is a very important thing. So as I mentioned earlier, I find this useful. So maybe if you spend time on contemplating on this 4 lines, one stanza about, about this pointlessness of worrying, maybe it can give us some kind of respite, some kind of calmness, some kind of soothing feeling. So the second slide is about the stress model. So why this is so important is related to stress. Many people are feeling stress, and stress is the biggest source of our problems, biggest source of physical and mental health issues. First, of course, is the mental health, and then, of course, is the physical health. So I have discussed this with you before, but since they may be newcomers, I thought to go through this. So according to the stress model, for us to function, we need a certain degree of stress. Without that degree of stress, we won't be able to function. We will be in the state of what is called the inertia. If we are sleeping, we won't be able to get up. We won't be able to get out of our bed and even prepare food and all that. We won't be able to do that. So we need a certain degree of stress. So that degree, what is called the optimum level of stress, is called eustress. That is the positive stress. That is the good stress that we all need. But if our stress level goes beyond the optimum level, if our stress exceeds that optimum threshold, then it becomes distress. Then it is dangerous. Then it is risky. then it has detrimental effect. So now, how does a stress becomes eustress or distress? It is completely contingent on how we appraise the situation. So if you look at the slide, you see we have events and stressor. So any event can be a stressor. So if we appraise a situation as a challenge or as an opportunity to practice Dharma, in our case, you can view this as an opportunity to practice Dharma, to apply Dharma. So when we perceive an event or situation as something, as an opportunity to do something great, or as a challenge to yourself, then instead of becoming distress, it becomes the optimum stress, the positive kind of stress, which is called the eustress. So that is not detrimental. That is good. That's why people find meaning from that. Some people travel all over the world. Like I think that Doctors with No Boundaries, these volunteers travel all over the world, especially when there are pandemics like this, Ebola, SARS. They volunteer and go there. And how they are able to endure this hardship is because they see as an opportunity to help other people. Some may even perceive it as a challenge, and because of that, the stress never exceeds beyond that threshold, and that's why there was no detrimental effect. And on the other hand, if you perceive the event as a threat or something undesirable, so it is same with your job. If we perceive our job as something, as a chore that I don't really want to, but then I have no choice but to do it. So with that kind of attitude, then there is a likelihood of our stress becoming distress, and that's dangerous. So that's why this is how related to stress. It is all about appraisal, how we see the situation. So that's why where the importance of narrative, the changing the narrative comes in. So if our narrative is all pessimistic, it's all negative, then we are more likely to experience distress than eustress. In contrast, if our narrative is positive, if we are able to see the upsides of the adversity, then we are more likely to experience eustress than distress. So you can see the importance of having this optimistic, the positive view of the situation. So now let's see what are the ways we can use to change our narrative. So the first main one is we have recited this line of prayers in Guru Puja. It says that Tena Chizun Lama Tujij Manjundrove. Sorry, this is not the one. It says that Nuju Tigbe Dibu Yongande Midu Tunye Chadar Babjujang Lenyen Debu Sebe Kurtone Kenyan Lamdo Lomber Chingilops. So in English, the translation is, even if the environment and beings are filled with the fruits of negative karma, and unwished for suffering pour down like rain. I seek your blessings to take these miserable conditions as a path, by seeing them as causes to exhaust the result of my negative karma. So we recite that prayer when we do Guru Puja. So this is the way to transform adversity into spiritual path. So there are different ways to do that. So in Lojong text, there are two major ways to transform our difficulties into path. The first one is through mental attitude, and then second one is through practice. There are 4 types of practices. So the first one about the mental attitude, changing our mental attitude. So this is relevant to our topic as well. Remember, for the past months, we have discussed verses by verses how all these various types of sufferings are results of our non-virtuous actions, negative karmas, and how that stemmed from this misconception, misapprehension of how I exist, or apprehending that there is this absolute self-identity. So this self-grasping, and then self-cherishing. Because of self-grasping, self-cherishing attitude arises. And because of that, we engage in all these negative actions, which give rise to all our. With this kind of adversities, the first thing for us is to contemplate on karma, the law of cause and effect. Remember, when we contemplate on the 4 characteristics of karma, so one of them is we will not experience any results that we have not created the causes. So, in other words, whatever we're experiencing, well, strictly speaking from the Buddhist perspective. So, if we are able to contemplate on that, and then if we are able to interpret our situations as a result of our previous actions, that's one way to go about. But just recognizing that these are the results of, these are the consequences of our past actions will not do much. But if we are able to go further than that, okay, I'm experiencing this, but this is perceived that way. This is a great opportunity to exhaust that karma. Obviously, I must have created this karma, and of course, I have to experience the results sooner or later. But since I am now experiencing it, it is a good thing. And especially when you are in a place where there is abundant resources. If you fall sick in India or in America, I think there is a huge difference in terms of facility. Maybe it used to be better, but I don't know about now. The situation seems to have reversed. The other countries seems to be doing better than America. Anyway, I think in Minneapolis or in Minnesota at the moment, yeah, we have better facilities. We have more hospitals. So if we factor all that, the bright sides, first of all, this is a great opportunity to exhaust our karma and also to experience this kind of karma in an environment that is conducive. At the moment, even though we cannot go out as often as we wish, but we are not short of other resources. We still have internet, we are still getting Dharma, our supplies, we can get it. So these are the positive sides. If you're able to look at those positive sides, that's one way to look at it and then reduce the stress. And then from the karma point of view, so it could be that this kind of problems or situations may be a reduction of what it was supposed to be, bigger consequences than that. Maybe we have created this karma, maybe this karma, if we had not experienced in this life, it may bring us to lower realms. Of course, we are not sure, but possibility is there. Remember when we talk about karma, how purification has effect on our negative karmas. So the strongest purification practice will uproot the negative actions. So you will never experience the result because you have eradicated from the root. You have eradicated the root of the negative actions. That's one way to purify negative actions. Another way is if your purification is at medium level, it will reduce the heaviness of the karma. If the karma is to bring you down to lower realms, instead, because you have done the purification, instead you will experience maybe a headache, and that's the way to exhaust that karma. So the medium level of purification reduces the heaviness of karma. And then minimally, as long as you do purification, the minimum benefit is that it will prevent from multiplying the negative karma. Remember, if you have created and if not purified, then karma multiplies. So this situation may be another way to experience the reduction of a particular heavy karma. So that's one way to look at things. And then when we go through this kind of experience, it is very humiliating. So the suffering has some kind of qualities, some kind of a positive impact on us. So in the Shantideva says that Shenyang tunye yonde ni kyowe tekwa sewarche kowalani ningjike tiglan zemshin kela ga. So when we experience this kind of a suffering, what will happen is it will help us reduce our arrogance, our pride, our this attitude of what do you call this conceit. Sometimes when things are going so well, people, become arrogant. They think that we are invincible, and we are independent. We don't need to rely on other people and all this. So when we suddenly fall sick and all that, then that will be a huge reminder that we are not so invisible and so independent as we thought. Because once we are sick, we have to rely on so many people's kindness. So one advantage, the one positive side that we can look at from this suffering is that it will humble us. And then we will be able to increase our empathy. So empathy is actually mirroring others' suffering. So when you don't go through that, it is cognitive empathy. We can imagine how that person is suffering. But when we ourselves went through the same kind of suffering, it is different. We are able to relate more with people. So in such difficult times, when we experience all this, so we can be able to, we will be able to, develop or generate compassion, because we have greater degree of empathy towards others, because from our own experience. So that's why I remember in compassion trainings, the advice is always that we have to first contemplate on our own suffering, the nature of suffering that we are in, how we suffer from 3 types of sufferings or 8 types of sufferings. So when we have this clear understanding of how we suffer, only then we will be able to understand others' suffering. So once we have reflected enough on our own suffering, then we can shift our attention, or we can shift our focus on others, and then it is easier to understand. So without that, strictly speaking, no matter how we try to generate compassion, it is difficult. So here, when we suffer, when we undergo this kind of hardship, that will enable us to be more compassionate towards us. So that's another opportunity to develop compassion towards others. And then it says, Tiglan zemshin gelaga. That means because of such experiences, we will be, or let's put it this way, we are more likely to engage in virtuous actions, and we are more likely to refrain ourselves from engaging in negative actions, because now we realize that suffering is the result of our negative actions. So if we don't want to experience that in the future, and if we want to experience happiness and joy, we have the discernment, we have the wisdom to realize that we need to engage in the causes and conditions. We need to cultivate the causes and conditions, and we need to stop the causes and conditions that give rise to such difficult experiences. So that's why it says that in such a situation, we will be able to do more Dharma. We will be propelled towards doing more practices. So these are some ways that we can adopt to look at the situation. And then it talks about the 4 practices. So the first one is to accumulate merit. So when we experience this kind of situation, when we are met with difficulties, so we should take it as a signal or a reminder from our gurus that we need to cultivate lots of merits. Because, as I mentioned earlier, happiness and suffering do not arise from no causes. It arises from causes and conditions. It requires causes and conditions. Not only does it require causes and conditions, it requires concordant or the causes and conditions corresponding to the result. So, if we want to experience joy and happiness, the only way to achieve that is to cultivate the causes, which is the virtuous actions. Likewise, if we don't want to experience suffering and misery, we should prevent ourselves from creating the causes and conditions, which are the negative actions. So when we experience this, one way is to take it as a reminder from our gurus that we need to engage in cultivating merits. Then another way to interpret this is that this is also a reminder from our guru that since we don't want to experience this kind of predicament, we want to get out of this kind of predicament, we need to purify all that negative actions that are the causes of our suffering. So, like this coronavirus thing, many people say that, oh, this, even they call it Chinese virus, and people blame China for that. But strictly speaking, from the karma point of view, it is our collective karma. If Buddha were to appear in front of us, and if we had the opportunity to ask him the causes of this, Buddha would tell us that, once, there was one time that, we all did this and this and that. In karma topics in the text, we see stories that there's one story where the 500 queens and then the one servant. So these 500 queens of a king, what do you call that's the word? Anyway, decided to burn down another hermit's house. The servant, the maid was reluctant. She didn't take part, but she had to go along with them. But she didn't do anything because she didn't want to take part in that. And then later, many years later, thousands of years later, and there was an incident where there were these 500 practitioners who have actually achieved some level of what do you call performing some miracles. They could fly through their what do you call the power of miracle. But they died. There was fire in that area, and those 500 people died, but only one escaped. And Buddha explained that to be the collective the result of the collective karma, the 500 princes, or the 500 queens, if I'm not mistaken, have created many eons ago. And the one who survived was the servant who didn't take part in that. So from these anecdotes, we can infer that there is something called collective karma. So this is not just something Chinese people have created. This is, we all created. We all took a part. Sometime in the past. So the final one is that, so because that we know that this is the result of karma, we should look at it as, okay, this is a reminder that we need to engage in purification practices. So as I mentioned earlier, that there are things that we can do. One thing is that, since we have this understanding about karma, we should engage in purification practice and make prayers that, whatever negative karmas that we have created in the past, to go through this kind of experience, be exhausted, be purified, and may this situation be over soon. So that's what I wanted to talk before we dive into the actual text. So I hope you will find a way to interpret this and then find a way to cope this and transform this into a Dharma practice. And of course, this we will talk later. This also gives us opportunity to practice Tonglen, giving and taking upon us all the sufferings and giving away our happiness and joy to others who are suffering. So let's get back into our text. So we finish, I think, verse 90. That was the last verse that we covered. So the last word says, failing to pursue any suitable deeds, I perform instead all that is inappropriate. Dance and trample on the head of this betrayer, false conception, mortally strike at the heart of this butcher and enemy, ego. So here, of course, we have already talked. Just to recap. So failing to pursue any suitable deeds. So here again, it is pinpointing the culprit here. So until now, actually, we can tell from our own experience that, we haven't been pursuing the suitable deeds. That's why there is always dissatisfaction. There's always suffering that we end up with. So this is due to negative karmas that we have created in the past, and that is a result, or that stemmed from this self-cherishing attitude, which is also stemmed from this self-grasping, this misconception of weaving absolute personal identity. So here is making a decision that now that we realize that we have failed to pursue the right deeds. So here, after recognizing that it is all due to having this prioritizing self over others, so here we are making the decisions that from here on, we will do the right things, which is instead of cherishing ourselves, instead of prioritizing the importance of I will instead prioritize cherishing others. So that's what it is. So now let's go to this 191, verse 91. Emma tade kombo jomzebe deshe chöji konga tudobji dame yishi sunja yugdoji tezo mebra lela lensum korrus. Powerful one, you who possesses the bliss gone's Dhammakaya and destroy the demon of egoistic views. O wielder of club, the weapon of no self-wisdom, twirl it over your head 3 times without hesitation. So this one is now that we have realized or we have identified our real enemy, which is the self-grasping. This view of weaving absolute personal identity. So after realizing the flaws and the disadvantages of this self-grasping, which obviously give rise to self-cherishing attitude, and as a result we engage in all the negativities and then we suffer. So now making a calling upon Yamendaka to destroy the demon of egoistic view. So powerful one, you who possess the bliss gone's Dharma. So here the Yamen, of course, making request to Yamantaka, who is the manifestation of the Buddha's wisdom or the Manjushri. So Manjushri in a wrathful form. So requesting Yamantaka to destroy our ego. And Yamantaka cannot physically destroy that. What can destroy our egoistic view is the wisdom realizing no selflessness. Wisdom realizing, in this case we can say emptiness. Wisdom realizing realizing the selflessness. So here the wielder of club, the weapon of no self, twirl it. So this the weapons represents the Buddha's the Yamantaka's wisdom realizing emptiness, and asking Yamantaka to using that, basically requesting us to bestow that wisdom so that we can destroy. That's one way to look at it. Another way is requesting Yamantaka to destroy our self-grasping using the weapon of the wisdom of selflessness. And then it's a twirl it over your head 3 times. So requesting to destroy 3 objects, 3 things. So the first one is the self. Remember, we have these 3 things. So because of self-grasping, so first of all, we have this notion, the mistaken notion of how I exist, how self exists. So that is a mistaken view of how I exist in reality. So because of that misconception, we have this attachment to us, to self, to I. So that is the self-cherishing attitude. So the self-grasping gives rise to self-cherishing attitude. And then self-cherishing attitude propel us to engage in negative actions. And then as a result, we suffer all kinds of sufferings. So here, asking the Yamantaka, requesting Yamantaka, calling upon Yamantaka to destroy these 3 things. First, the self-grasping attitude, and then the self-cherishing attitude, and then the impure mental and physical, the resultant, let's put it this way, the resultant impure mental and physical conditions. So that's the verse 91. And then let's go to the verse 92. Namdab chenbu tadi tedusu, sherab chenbu tongni shomdusu, ningji chenbu lele kyabdusu, nyabaratani lakwar jadusu. So here again, okay, let me read the English. With your great ferocity, obliterate this enemy. With your great wisdom, dismantle this false conception. With your great compassion, protect me from my karma. Help destroy this ego once and for all. So here we are calling upon Yamantaka to do 3 specific things. So first one, with your great ferocity, obliterate this enemy. Ngamdab Chembu. So the Yamantaka, as you see in the image here, so Yamantaka, the form is really scary and wrathful. So that with your that kind of ferocity, please obliterate, please eradicate this. When we say this enemy, here this enemy is this view of personal identity, this absolute personal identity, or the self-grasping. So here the first one is making requests to obliterate this self-grasping attitude. And then sherab chembu tongni shomdusu. And then sherab chembu tongni shomdusu. So the second request is, with your great wisdom, dismantle this false conception. So the false conception here is the self-cherishing attitude that stems from self-grasping. And then the third request is, with your compassion, protect me from my karma. So with the self-grasping, it gives rise to self-cherishing attitude. And self-cherishing attitude give rise to all these negative attitudes and a negative karma. So negative karma results into all that suffering. So here when we say Nyingji, so you say, with your great compassion, protect me from my karma. So the resultant negative karmas, so requesting the Yamantaka to protect us from these negative actions that will eventually result into us suffering. So help destroy this ego once and for all. So all this arise from our ego. So again, calling upon Yamantaka to destroy this ego once and for all. And then the next stanza is on Tonglen. So I think we better stop here because it will take some time if I go into the Tonglen practice. So maybe we can try to do during the next class. Okay, let's stop here. It's already 1 hour. So thank you very much, and please keep safe. Keep safe. And I will see you. Oh, I wanted to read you before we go. I received this. Maybe you all have received, but I thought that this is quite funny. So this one, it says, just received a notice from the Psychiatric Association. Dear citizens, during the quarantine time, it is considered normal to talk to your plants and pots. Okay? It is normal to talk to your plants and pots. Kindly contact us only if they reply. Okay? You only call them, you only contact them when the pots and plants started to reply, started to respond. I thought this is quite hilarious. Okay, thank you, and see you next time. Let's dedicate our merits. Tagi jini sabe yawa di tenda jowa kunla kangben da kebara chuzun losan tagba yi tembe nyingbu ringdu seje sho gangri rawe korwe shingam so pendan tewa malun jungwe ne jenre sewan tenzin yazo yi shabe site padu tengyuru ji simjin neba chinye ba nyodo nele targyo ji jowe nenam malu ba Taudu jungwara mebara sho jambe pawe jedara kemba da kondo sangbo tenyang teshendu teda kungi jesu talobji. Gyawa deda tamje rabdu ngo tusun shebe kyawa tamje gi ngowa kanla shokdu ngaba de dagi kewe tsawan digwen. Zangbo choje rabdu ngo waragis.